quizás también estar de la forma quizás que yo no la tuve para Máximo. Y también comprender que el padre no solo es el que pone los límites y las reglas, sino que también está ahí para hablar, acompañar, regalonear, jugar, cosas lindas también, no solo ser el guía para el niño, sino que también un compañero de vida.
I was more of a elated and thankful because for 3 months I was in baby land and when you're in baby world you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants and hoping you know that you're just supportive in the ways that you can be supportive.
Pero pues aquí pues ya los enseñan un poquito más cosas que uno no sabía, cómo cuidarla, cómo desarrollarla, cómo educarla, y pues es algo bien porque pues cosas que yo no sabía pues ya usted nos las dijo y todo como consejos, y pues muchas cosas que se aprendieron.
Bueno, creo que por mi parte esperaba algo totalmente diferente, como un programa más frío, por decir algo, no tan cercano a la familia, sino más bien un programa de estado programado para la ayuda solamente. Y a través del programa nos hemos dado cuenta que también pasa a ser una familia con nosotros, porque nos apoya en los momentos difíciles o cuando nos hemos visto en dificultades. Siempre nos hemos podido apoyar en Gaby a través de su programa. Encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
You know, my experience has been nothing but positive. Annette has been wonderful. She's on time. She lets me know if there's going to be any changes in the schedule.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I still feel the challenge of being a parent now in today's world is immense. I think that you need support.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa, que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Don't be afraid to take that step. Like, don't be afraid to get help, because you might think that you know what you're doing, but it's always okay to have extra support, and don't do it alone.
Give it a try. You got nothing to lose. It's free. I'm grateful that I took advantage, because it's something that has put me in touch with my child, or closer to my child and her development.
Governance to order, and can we have roll call?
Recording in progress.
Here. Here.
Director Greta Connie, Director Bernie Norvell,
Here.
Director Joseph, Tasha Ostran,
Here.
and Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes, here. Just clarification, do we have any notifications regarding AB 2449?
We have not received any requests for 2449.
Okay, thanks. All right, next on our agenda is a recommendation to approve recommendation from the Executive Committee, which is, so we have the closed session here, but we also have, this is the item, the action item.
Yes, this is the action item with the optional closed session.
Okay, so the executive committee acting on behalf of the board worked with outside consultants who conducted an RFP process for both planning and administration for MCOG, and the outside consultants are here to give us maybe just an overview of the RFP process and as an informational update to the board.
Is it on, Julie? Okay, thank you. I'm Mara Toomey with the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, and this is Diane Idem, who is a retired annuitant for the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. And we were hired by the board to do a request for proposals for your executive director and staffing for your agency, as your agency is staffed by an outside consultant. We met with the special committee, the executive committee, prior to issuing the RFP to outline the scope of services and any particular issues that the committee had that they wanted included in the request for proposals. We issued the request for proposals in accordance with MCOG standards and California Public Contracts Code. We received responses to those proposals, and those responses were reviewed by the executive committee a few weeks back. The executive committee came to a decision to recommend to the board on action for the contracts. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Not fielding a lot of questions here.
No, I like these kind of questions. So.
Maybe you could just give, just very briefly, so there are a handful of regional transportation planning agencies like Mendocino County that have a contracted service. And so that's the reason for the RFP process.
Right. Only only a few small agencies, primarily in the North State, contract out for their services to run their agency. So we advertise based on that. So Lake and Mendocino are two, and there's a couple other very small ones up in the north part of the state. So it is an unusual RFP to issue, and we did field a number of questions during the process regarding the services to be provided.
Just to clarify, the recommendation of the executive committee is to give direction to consultants to negotiate the finer details of the contract, which we brought back at our next meeting. And we did, just as a fail-safe, we did include a closed session here just in case board members who were not in the executive committee wanted to ask questions, closed session. But other than that, the recommendation of the committee is to give direction for them to kind of wrap up the final details of the contracts for our next agenda.
To award to the two consultants,
Yeah.
and then to negotiate the contract, yes.
So certainly entertain a motion.
So the motion is to direct the consultants to bring back the finalized contracts. And
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
Okay. Not seeing any more questions. Do we have any comments or questions from the audience? Okay. All right. Can we have a roll call?
Director John Haschek,
Yes.
Director Mike Carter,
Yes.
Director Greta Connie,
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Director Jose. Yes. Tasha Ostran,
I didn't think that I was voting on this. I'm going to abstain.
and Chair Dan Drury.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks. And so I don't think that you need to be personally in attendance at the next meeting, but certainly if you're available by Zoom at the next meeting to field questions if there are any about the actual contract substance.
Right.
So
We will be here.
right. Well, great.
If I could just, we had these two contracts. I'm hearing an echo. Anyone? Anyway, I think that we're We had one applicant for each of these contracts, but I think that we're very well served with the services that we're getting in both regards. So thank you.
I think, yeah, it's pretty evident. I mean, you look at the number of grants that come into Mendocino for transportation projects, it's probably substantially above what other small counties are seeing. I think it's largely to do to MCOG. Okay. So we're going to convene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency now and recess as the RTPA and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. That brings us to approval of the consent calendar, which is the March 4th and April 17th minutes, the approval of the February 29th and April 15th Executive Committee minutes, and acceptance of the 22-23 fiscal audit of MTA. Would someone like to move approval of the consent calendar?
I'll move that we adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Do we have any public comments on the consent calendar? Seeing any, we have a roll call.
Director John Haschek?
Yes.
Director Mike Carter?
Yes.
Director Greta Connie?
Yes.
Director Josefina Duedes? Tasha Alstrand?
Yes.
And Chair Danger.
Yes. Okay, that takes us to the fiscal year 24-25 RTPA budget and presentation plus workshop.
Can we do public expression?
I'm sorry, do we have public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gizmo. I'm asking, I'm going to present this letter, and I'm going to just say that it is intended to go to the California Highway Patrol. It's intended to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles Safety Division. It's also intended to go to Caltrans. They have a Department of Transportation and Trailer Safety also. So I wanted to read it into public comment first, and in case there's any questions, I'll get on the agenda for next month, and I'll submit it about 5 days or 7 days before next month's meeting, so you'll have time to look it over before and then not discuss it under the Brown Act. So I just wanted to make that clear. Here we go. We at MCOG agree with Gizmo, who has formatted a solution for fire prevention. Mr. Henderson strongly suggests as a matter of public safety and California state responsibility that all ball-type draw-style trailers sold in California or sold in Mendocino County, but I put California, sold in California require a sticker that directly reflects the California Vehicle Code, Section 29004, Paragraph C, and also include a best practices towing and trailer safety YouTube type video easily played on your devices, along with a paper pamphlet handout in English and Spanish. The video should be required to be watched at every point of sale. Pamphlet handouts should be mandatory for every traffic stop by the CHP when involving a ball-type drawbar style trailer. Pamphlets also should be made available at the CHP, DMV, and local libraries. We believe that this three-pronged educational approach, the video, the pamphlet, and the sticker, is a necessary step for our essential safety. Our last determined trailer chain fire was in September of 2023 and less than a mile from the CAL FIRE headquarters on the 101 Ridgewood grade, south side, with multiple ignition points and resources spent extinguishing the fire and trying to locate the vehicle, which I have not been able to find an answer on if we ever did find the vehicle. I know the sheriff's used the helicopters, and they were looking all the way up into Del Norte County. So this is a lot of money being spent and possibly never even finding the person, and continuing on to possibly spark more fires along the road. Please implement these programs with the utmost urgency in 24/2025. Furthermore, take into account the psychological effects, not just the monetary, that a trailer chain fire would have on a small community whose residents have already endured a catastrophic fire event from something we believe is mostly preventable. Authored by Gizmo, and thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Okay.
We do also have members of the public online. I don't know if any of them were wishing to provide comment.
Someone wants to comment, they might raise their hand on Zoom. I'm not seeing any.
And we did receive a letter. Grassroots. Shall I read that into the record? I believe the author is. Essentially, this letter that we received on May 3rd requests that the Grassroots Institute be a member of the technical advisory group being formed for the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan project. And I assume, excuse me, I assume we would forward that to our planning staffer.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Peter McNamee.
Mr. McNamee, are you able to speak? You might be muted.
Sorry about that. I was struggling with the screen, and I apologize for taking your valuable time. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I sent this letter because and I was holding my comments because I didn't know what your procedures were exactly, but I understand you have a report that's going to be made relative to item FI. So my question is it appropriate for me to make comments now or wait until that item is presented?
So FI is planning, verbal report from planning staff on the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan. So I would say if your comments are specific to that, it might be best to hold them until that item.
That is my intent then. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other public comment on non-agenda items? All right, not seeing any of the week. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the consent calendar? I'm sorry, no, that takes us to the regular calendar fiscal 24-25 budget.
So moved.
Okay, that will be my item.
I'm sorry, we did the consent calendar. We're now on to the fiscal year 24-25 RTPA budget.
Thank you. And I would like to share my screen. So if you'll with me for a moment. I have a slide presentation. open my, get this. There we go. I'm not, did something wrong. Bear with me here. Okay, share, and here's my item. Share. There, okay, can you see that now? And I'll start the slideshow. There we go. From the beginning. Come on. Having a little, there we go. And now it's, sorry, I have to figure out how to do my controls. Oh. So sorry. Get so that where I can control the slides. Here we go. Button sticking here. Don't do this very often. More time from the beginning. I thought it was already up. Okay. And now I'm not on the right slide. I think I need to be able to page. The only thing going wrong here right now is that I can't start from the beginning, so I'm trying to find my spot. Yeah. Okay. It's left and right, and I'm too far. It's not going to the beginning, I'm sorry. I would like to open it one more time and see if I can start from the very beginning. Oh, I think what I will do is get the first page. Excuse me, I'm really sorry this is taking me so long. I need Scott. Scott's going to help me get to the beginning of this. Okay. Here we are.
You don't want to be
in Zoom, right? Or PowerPoint. Okay. I'll be in PowerPoint. And okay. Okay. All right. You are familiar with our budget process by now, and you have my written report in the agenda packet detailing the steps taken through the work of our committees and the major budget issues that are coming up. It's looking a bit different this year, and I will walk through things visually here on the slides with my usual presentation, updated to reflect these changes. And I've also made that available on the board meeting webpage. So I'll try to move more quickly through the more routine items and spend most of our time today on the important highlights. And if any of you committee members have comments along the way, please do chime in. And just briefly, each year I like to choose a photo that I've taken somewhere in the beautiful scenery of Mendocino County that features transportation. And this one is of the Albion River Bridge, where we took the California Transportation Commissioners on a tour after the town hall a couple of weeks ago. And now I need to get the next one. Requires this. All right, using my mouse. And I'm not sure what you're seeing. You're seeing not my slideshow. That's what's confusing. So I might need Scott one more time on the wrong thing. Slideshow from the beginning. This is what I'm trying to do. Yeah, okay, well, this is the right slide, but it's still taking a place I didn't want to be before. All right, so we have local, state, and federal funds, various types. These are the major sources here. MCOG is responsible for administering the TDA, Transportation Development Act, in Mendocino County. And most of the state funds listed here are for planning. You'll find in the agenda packet a report that Alexis prepared on the planning program, which we'll get to in due course. The ATP, and that's the Active Transportation Program, and the SHOP funds shown here are for the Covelo Trail project. And the annual federal funds, the Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, are routinely exchanged for state funds, which makes things a bit easier. You can find details about all the funding sources in the explanatory notes we provided, including some links for more information online. Now I've got to figure out. There we go, but it's still not showing graphics, so I don't know what's wrong. You have a one-page summary that I was going to show you what it looks like, but you've got that in your packet. And I'm still not seeing graphics coming up here. Maybe Scott can help me out, but I'm not seeing my full presentation. I'm so sorry. We do have a more detailed supplemental format, which is running to 4 pages now. And I finished that after the packet went out, so you can find it now on the website, and of course it will be included in the final budget document. This one is arranged by local, state, and federal sources also, just in a different layout that allows for more itemizing and notes, and also a comparison to the previous year. And this slide ought to show you what that looks like in a snapshot view, which I'm not seeing, unfortunately. So I need a little tech help here. Scott's going to fiddle with this some more. This next one is just showed a snapshot of what the explanatory notes page looks like. And as I mentioned, if you'd like more detail on any of the funding sources, we have these notes for reference updated annually. And this year, I've added another page with the new Senate Bill 125 transit formula and zero emission transit capital funds, and we'll get to that in a moment. And now I see, well, anything with text, Scott, is what I'm seeing, but nothing with nothing with an attachment on it. So I think the rest of my slides are all just text-based, so we'll see when we get there. I hope it's all here. I do have that posted online on the meetings page if you'd like to see what it look like. All right. So now, these are the main points I'd like to make about the revenues, and then I'll get to allocations next. There are more unknowns than usual this year, more than we'd like to see at this point in budget development. You'll recall from in the current year we're in now, in 23-24, we had several budget amendments dealing with the shortfall from the original high estimate of the local transportation funds that come from sales tax. And that was started out at 4.9 million, and then partway through the year, we got a revised estimate, and that came down to 4.2 million. And so the auditor, acting auditor controller has provided just a flat new estimate for 24-25 of that same 4.2 million as was revised for this year. And until she has more information and can give us an update, this is what we have to work. So what we are calling the COVID bump, that's when revenues were unusually high in fiscal years 20 to 21 and 21-22. Those 2 years were reaching about $5 million. So during that time, the reserve fund and surplus above the estimates that came out of that time gave us a buffer from what would have been painful budget cuts. But that's not the case going forward. We've used those up. Those reserves are depleted. Actual funding that came in 2021 fiscal year was at $5 million, and then $4.9 million the following year, 21-22. And so now that's dropping down quite a bit. So right now we are going with this 4.2 million. You can see we did actually get in the last audit year 4.5 million. So not significantly higher, but it could come in slightly higher. So what we're seeing is a return to pre-pandemic levels of local sales tax revenue. And that might not be so bad, except that costs have been rising in the meantime. So it's still a problem. The executive committee met and recommended a reserve of 10%, and that's down from 15%. And it's higher than the policy minimum of 5%, and that was considered a sustainable path forward. But this will require an infusion of new funds. And we'll be showing you some more of those numbers. And MTA management, Mendocino Transit Authority, has agreed with that plan. Now on the plus side, state transit assistance, that's from fuel taxes, is up. And we have a state controller's estimate of over $1 million for a second year. So that does help balance things somewhat. And the new thing this year that we're seeing is the Senate Bill 125 transit funding. And I have in my packet the full name of that. It's formula-based transit and intercity rail capital plan, TIRCP, and zero emission transit capital plan. So the TIRCP was a pre-existing program, but that was a competitive program. It's still going on. They're actually opening for proposals now. But the new funds that you adopted an allocation plan for last December have been frozen by the governor right now. So we're waiting to see what happens. We're told that those will be held until the May revise from the governor's budget. And so that would be 5.3 million. That's for multi-years. So we're just putting the whole amount in there and it'll be spread. We'll use some of that going forward once we do see that money come in. So that's one of the big unknowns here. So the total of all the sources that I have in the summary sheets is over 15 million if we can include the new funds, and it's about 10 million without counting. So we hope to have some answers by next month when we adopt a budget, but it may require a later amendment. Are there any questions or comments so far about the revenues? Yes, Director Hasjack.
Yeah, with the TIRCP funds, that, I know we had that discussion and we prioritized the money. Mm-hmm. Has any of that money been committed?
No, we've planned for it, planned uses for it, but none of it has actually been, we've committed it on paper, but we have not actually received any of the funds yet, and we haven't incurred expenses that would be going against that because we hadn't actually put any of it in our current fiscal year budget, in the 23-24 budget, all in next fiscal year. So any expenses incurred against that would be next year. So we'll wait to see if that's actually going to be possible.
Okay, that's good because I My understanding of the meetings with CalCog is that a lot of COGs have already allocated that money, or
Yes,
parts of it.
and there was another source of funds, so a lot of one-time funding sources have been either frozen or rescinded, and another one that I know has been a big discussion at CalCog was the second part of the Regional Early Action Planning funds. MCOG did not have any of those funds, which in hindsight, maybe that was a good thing. But those are the ones that they were actually allocated 2 or 3 years ago. And so a lot of those funds had been, expenses had been incurred against those funds, and it was just a matter of invoicing for them for many regions that were doing that work. This one is still a big hit, especially to the transit agencies, but I guess fortunately the work that it's paying for, at least for us, has not actually happened yet.
Thank you.
All right, I'll move on to the allocations if you're ready for that. All right, so start with the administration, as this is one of the uncertainties in the draft. The board took action a few minutes ago to negotiate contracts for staffing. Thank you very much. So for now, we have just a placeholder estimate for cost. Most of the administration cost comes from the LTF, the local transportation funds. And then a lesser amount from the surface transportation funds for local assistance. And new this year, we're just talking about the SB 125. There is a very small portion set aside for administration. It's 1% of the total 11 million, so it's 110,000 complete plan. We're talking about drawing down half of that and then just taking, that's meant to go for about 4 years, I think, and so there's, I think, a $27,000 figure that's just a quarter of that for admin. We haven't seen that money yet, so we're assuming we're going to get that money. If we didn't, we would need to look elsewhere. The most logical place to fill that gap would be from the surface transportation funds, which is the most discretionary that we have. I know I've spent many, many hours over the years administering that fund, and that was, my time was paid for by LTF. So there is some administration involved in that fund. It might make sense to use some for that, but it's just something to consider. We're not at that point yet. But no, I think we'd have a few options to look at. So fortunately, the planning program is doing okay from what I know. Alexis can talk more about that when we come to planning section here. The majority of the LTF funds do go to public transit. As you can see here in the slide, we are seeing a very painful drop in resources, and that's been described statewide for transit as a fiscal cliff. And there are very limited options for making up that gap. You can see it's down 25% overall. And that's from the original budget we started with, the $4.9 million budget that's now 4.2, so it's down 18% even from that. So that is not looking good. MTA has told us that they're short $1 million to make their budget whole. And this will be especially hard on the senior centers providing transportation services. And they have even more limited resources. We talked about that a lot in the Transit Productivity Committee last Thursday. Discussed that pretty extensively. So looking at anything we can do for them. Even assuming the SB 125 funds do come through as expected, we'll still need to review the use of this mainly capital program for operations uses and how that would impact the approved allocation plan that we already have. So, you know, we're looking at that. I know MTA is hoping to be able to use that fund, but that's going to require some changes. We'll have to look at eligibility. We're going to have to look at whether this board wants to use it for that. So there's some things to do there. Any comments? Like Nafili's ready.
Yep. I just want to add on to the last item that Janet mentioned, the MTA anticipated shortfall in their 24-25 budget. So those of you that were in the TPC meeting last week will have heard about this. But they are expecting, due to increased costs, reduced revenues, they are anticipating a shortfall in their budget. And one of the reasons that SB 125 was created, was approved by the state, was to address the fiscal cliff that transit operators all around California have been talking about for the last year and a half, maybe longer. So it took a little longer to catch up with Mendocino County, but MTA is now sort of facing that same, obviously at a different scale than some of the very large transit operators, but they are now facing some of those same problems. The allocation plan for SB 125 that was approved in December, it included, or it identified all as one large project, but 3 different activities within that project. It included funding, setting aside some funding for project development for a Ukiah Area Transit Center, zero-emission vehicle replacement, and pilot project service to Laytonville and Covelo. So it is possible, or we expect that we will be receiving a request from MTA to amend the allocation plan. We need to amend it anyway because the plan that we approved only utilized a portion of the funding. We'll have to amend it to utilize all funding unless we hear from the state that the program is canceled completely rather than just temporarily frozen. So we expect that we will be receiving a request from MTA to consider either some of the additional funding, SB 125 funding that's not yet identified for any of those activities, or depending on the timing of those future year funds, possibly switching some of the already approved funding for operations, which would then mean that later year funding would still be available. So this is not something that's on the agenda today, but it is, of course, related to the budget. So we do expect that we'll have that. If we do receive a request from MTA, it'll be most likely on the June MCOG agenda with action on the budget.
So Nafili, my recollection from the meeting is there's only one formula funding source that's available to the senior centers, and that's the LTF funds.
Yes, the agreement, the decades-old agreement between MTA and the senior centers is that they get a certain percentage. It's about roughly 15% of the LTF funding specifically goes to the senior centers for their transportation programs, and then it's divided up by a formula that was approved a couple of years ago.
But the senior centers are eligible to apply for competitive funds, or at least some of the competitive funds that are available for transit. And so it sounds like they've mostly routinely applied, or every other year, let's say, applied for capital projects like for buses. But that I think at the meeting it sounded like of the 4 senior centers, the 4 major senior centers, let's say, only one of them is currently applying for a grant fund for operational expenses. And I think that was Point Arena.
That's correct.
Yes, the FTA Section 5310 grant program is the one program that it's actually targeted for that specialized type of transportation. It can provide capital for vehicles, but then there also is a portion of the program for operations. which can be for service expansion or for mobility management. So the coastal seniors in Point Arena, they are currently receiving, I think they're on their second operations grant. It was originally a service expansion grant, and then they got a grant to continue that expanded service. So it could be an opportunity, or it could be, I guess, this could be incentive for some of the other centers to apply, and that's something we would be able to help them with if they were interested.
Yeah, it just seems like obviously no sure thing when you're applying for a competitive grant, but if the LTF funds, the COVID bump is disappearing and the net effect to the senior centers and to MTA is about a 20% reduction in the LTF funds, kind of sounds like the only option outside of fundraising, which they're always tapping that out to its max, would be to apply for, I guess, the 5310 funds for dispatch and a couple other kind of costs that are eligible for that program.
Yes, and that would be, we expect that the next call for projects would be next year. So there would still be, you know, a gap that they would need to address in some way. But yes, that would be, it would make a lot of sense for them to do that.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments on this part of the budget presentation?
Okay, I'll keep going. It just looks like MTA's got to look to more state and federal sources and can't expect to get as much from the local right now. All right, so this is number 10A on your agenda. This is the fiscal year to date. The actual receipts, we've got 8 months of receipts now. And this is going by the revised estimate from the auditor that we got in February. So the actuals are tracking better with this amended budget. And by that measure, the fiscal year-to-date revenues are actually up a little bit. They're coming in about 2.5% above the budget so far. So there's about 100,000 there. That's a good indication. I hope that keeps going. Otherwise, if we hadn't done that, those amendments, we would be looking at that big shortfall down there at the bottom line of more than 650,000 from the original estimate. So it's good that we've already dealt with that. Just looking at the trend line here very briefly, this is the local revenues going back a number of years. That first dip on the left-hand side there, that reflects the Great Recession around 2009. And then you'll see on the right the COVID bump, we're calling it, from fiscal years 2021 to 21-22. That reflected the pandemic economy. Smaller spikes in between are mostly represent differences between estimates and actuals. But the trend is still moving upward, reflecting the economy, I suppose. That last red line taking a dive there at the end is partially reflecting lower proposed allocations for 24-25 in order to replenish the reserve fund. So if we're taking out, you know, $250,000 to put into the reserve fund, that's making that line go down even farther, dipping into allocations a bit. So. And just this is the final step in determining available revenues for allocation from the LTF, and that is setting the reserve balance. It's that 3-year window that I'm always talking about. We're in the middle step right now. I won't go into this unless you've got questions. Basically, we're preparing the budget, setting that reserve balance now. So here's where you don't get to see my little picture, and that's kind of unfortunate. I had a little budget calculus that's in the detailed spreadsheet that shows how we got to the numbers on the reserve fund, but I do have that supplemental format posted on our meetings page now. So, and that'll go in the final budget, and you can see how we got to those numbers. I did want to show you that I had that. This year, the executive committee proposes reserving $424,000, and that's requiring those new funds to get up to that balance. So we did work through this with the executive committee, both for the current year amendment and also the new proposal. So I would ask for questions. You can't even see that, so sorry it came out that way. But this brings us now to the allocations. These are the established priorities consistent with the Transportation Development Act. It's admin, bike and ped, planning program, and transit, which gets most of the funds. Here's how the LTF has been allocated over the past 15 years or so, with the new proposal added in at the end. You can see there's been kind of normal economic growth. Well, after that recession dip, then it's pretty normal growth up until you get to this pandemic spike. You can see those tall columns, and then now it's dropping down to more normal levels. These color codes just show how MCOG's own programs there have remained fairly level at the base of the bars there, while the trend of MTA allocations, that's the tall purple bars, follows the economic trends that again shows that pandemic bump. So I could get into this more, but I think I'll keep going unless you want to come back to it. This now is the administration. Shows that I'm going to show the 3-year breakdown of each of the 4 major allocation priorities. That's number 10B now on the agenda. Starting with administration. So you can see administration costs have been keeping fairly steady, though the drop in LTF revenue makes that budget percentage look higher, all the way up at 13%. I will say, though, that considering all the funds that we're administering, we're really at about 4.5% for administration of all the funds that we take in. We do try to constrain these costs, and Nafili has endeavored to spread these costs appropriately across available funds other than the LTF. This is the planning picture. It's 10C on the agenda. The Technical Advisory Committee's proposal uses a traditional 3% target of the 3% of the auditor's LTF estimate for planning. So it was a little higher on that left-hand side, the fiscal year 22-23. There was a project reserve of $150,000 that kind of doubled that budget there. That was to do some transit studies, and we don't usually have that in there. So it's usually about 3%. And I see that Lexi has actually got that number down, 127,300 for this coming year, and there's some carryover, and that'll be adjusted when we have actual. So this is a snapshot of all the allocations for planning with all of the different funding sources using local, state, and federal funds. If Lexi's on the line and wants to speak to this now, I could let her talk about it. Or we can come back to that. But if she's ready to say anything, I could bring her on.
Thanks, Janet.
Okay.
I certainly can right now, but I also know that this OWP is the next agenda item, and I'm hoping for adoption of the final, so I don't know if it would be better to do it now or right after your budget, so I can go and get a motion for the OWP.
Yeah, as you wish. I think you have a staff report in there for the number 11 on the agenda. That's to adopt the program. So this is just a snapshot. We could keep going if you like. This just shows you, well, there's 970,000 and change for total right now. That tends to change as we have actuals in and have a budget amendment or an OWP amendment, I should say, after the end of the fiscal year. So it's mostly MCOG. We've got some county transportation as typical combined special studies in there, and Point Arena has a carryover from a prior year. Sometimes we have other member agencies that ask for these funds. Keep going on to transit. So that's ND on the agenda. This is what the Transit Committee looked at. You'll see that the 23-24 allocations are from the amended budget. So that 3.2 million in their claim, that was a revised claim. although we did not cut the seniors' budget in this year, 23-24. That was their full allocation. That wasn't touched. So I'll note the budget is still over allocated by about $460,000, and that's intended to be paid out of the reserve fund. That's where we left things for the amendment. So this year we're seeing a big decrease of that 25% I mentioned. The other allocation priorities are pretty level, but this is the one that's taking the hit because they're also the ones that get any extra funds or higher amounts when the economy's looking good. So this is kind of bringing us back to where we usually are. As I've mentioned, senior centers are seeing about a 24% decrease unless some other funds can be found to fill the gap. There are no easy solutions on that one. The Transit Committee did meet last Thursday on May 2nd, and meeting minutes are not yet available, but the committee did recommend MTA's annual claim as it was submitted, claiming all of the available LTF and the State Transit Assistance funds as well that are in the draft budget. So anything they could claim, now they have claimed, and that claim looked good, so they're recommending that. As far as the unmet needs, that's the other thing they look at. Transit Committee recommended a finding that there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet for fiscal year 24-25 for the top 3 needs. And those are contingent on us getting that SB 125 transit capital funding and all for one of the needs. And that's already in the allocation plan. That's the Covelo-Laytonville service that came out of the mobility solutions study for remote communities. That's in our allocation plan, am I right? And so we're hoping to get that money. That would actually meet a need to do a pilot project. And the rest of it is evening service in Ukiah. And they're looking at asking Mendocino College to chip in to help pay for that. A lot of the service would go to students out there. And so that would not necessarily be all from LTF. So none of these unmet needs would come from LTF money. So we'll also be asking the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council for a recommendation also. They're the ones that started that list last fall. The Transit Committee, Transit Productivity Committee made some other recommendations dealing with performance and standards, and I'll report out those later, probably next meeting. So this is the final priority out of the 4 categories, and they get most of the money. It's typically around 80% of the local. Moving on, we're getting there. This is just a reminder of the funds that come through Senate Bill 1 in the budget. We sometimes have competitive planning grants. Lexi's report shows MCOG won a planning grant for the Noyo Harbor multimodal circulation plan. And additionally, what we don't see in our budget are SB1 funds that go directly to the cities and county through the California Transportation Commission. Not a whole lot to point out here. There's the State of Good Repair. That's a smaller fund. You do that by a separate resolution. It is in the budget, though. And I just have a quick slide to show a similar trajectory on, similar to the LTF with the Surface Transportation Block Grant, or STBG funds, which, as I've mentioned, that MCOG elects to exchange for the more flexible state dollars. This did start around, when it began, around $500,000 a year. Now it's topped $1 million under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law. And the new estimate for us this coming year is $1,045,738. So this is about the 3 programs that we run through that fund. Probably pretty familiar with that. Those started out with the 2010 board strategic planning. And funding is based on federal estimates. They are allocated by the state down to the regional level, but we know what that estimate is. It's over $1 million, as I just noted there. We have our partnership program, comes off the top. Then we have our local assistance, that's a staff position at, for MCOG. And most of the money, about 75%, goes out to the county and cities by a formula that we have. So in conclusion, we're just about done here. These are things not in the budget. I'm sure you're aware. STIP funds don't go through. We don't have cash flow on that. And the safe motor state call box system does not, it has its own separate budget. So just a couple of things to remember. And finally, you do have staff and committee recommendations on each aspect of the budget. We have one more meeting of the SS TAC that we need to schedule so they can recommend on the unmet transit needs. In June, allocating resolutions are to be adopted, and you'll have all the detailed exhibits and the findings that are required to be made in those resolutions. The final budget is will be available as a PDF document, and you can also request a bound document. I always make these versions available. It's always something you can ask for. And what else did I want to say? Typically, the planning program does get amended more than once, and we just administratively update our records. We don't come back to you to amend that, but it is likely, as we've been discussing here, we could probably expect an amendment to come back to the board for approval. And other than that, you'll be adopting a budget next meeting in June. So that concludes my presentation. Are there any further questions, comments? I kind of read through a lot of that, so I keep up on our time here. So is there anything else that we ought to hear about? Well, thank you very much for your time, and you'll be hearing more about this. I can stop.
Okay.
Sharing,
do we have any questions or comments online in the audience?
I'm going to stop this screen and hope we don't need to go back to it. That was a little tricky. So
okay, well, so budget.
I am finished.
Budget adoption is scheduled for next month, and if anyone has any questions or comments, I think they're going to prepare the budget more or less as we just saw it.
Great.
Okay, well, that takes us to item 11, which is adoption of the final year 24-25 overall work program.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize for not being in person this morning. I started feeling really crummy in the office, and so I decided not to share all of my germs with everyone. So I do apologize for being on Zoom. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and moving forward, this is the 24-25 final overall work program. This process for the overall work program starts back in October. And it goes before the TAC. Applications are submitted. The TAC reviews it, reviews applications. The draft is developed. The draft is reviewed, and then we submit the draft to Caltrans by our March 1st deadline. We bring all of the preliminary discussions to the executive committee for their preliminary budget discussion, and then we begin working into the final overall work program, where we work with carryover projects and responding to all of our comments that were submitted by Caltrans. So with that being said, I'd like to share my screen. Everyone should have seen the overall work program. It was posted online along with my staff report. Here is the spreadsheet that is pretty easy to see by funding source. Since we were just talking with Janet a little bit about the funding sources, this is the easier one to identify. Quickly, you can see at the top, here is the local LTF, the state PPM, the state RPA, and other grants. Moving down the line, there are some annual elements that some of you are pretty familiar with. We have the regional government intergovernmental coordination, $147,000. And you can see before the actual project, it has the identified designated agency that will be completing these work elements, the planning management and general coordination. This element has been added this year. It's the Regional Transportation Plan and Active Transportation Plan, the 2026 update. This will be done by MCOG staff, and this is the beginning of the process to the multi-year update. The MCOG Sustainable Transportation Planning, this one is bolded because we did estimate a little bit of carryover into this element, so it's bolded to increase it slightly with a little bit of carryover. This work element 5, this is a pending, a holding, it's a placeholder for a pending grant application. It's for the sea level rise roadway impact study. This was an application that MCOG had applied for a sustainable transportation planning grant. We have not heard the result of that project yet, but we've been requested by Caltrans to add this in as pending into our work program. 6 is the county DOT, the combined special studies, $54,000. The planning, programming, and monitoring, this element also has a slight amount of carryover estimated here to bump it up just a little bit. Work element 8 is the regional leadership training. This is all estimated carryover. This element will not, MCOG will no longer be the designated agency to issue the CARL, the California Regional Academy for Regional Leadership Program. It will no longer be the designated agency to issue the RCTS scholarships. So this is just a placeholder for carryover, and we'll be closing out very soon. Work element 9 is the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan. This is a carryover project, and these are estimates. These will be updated as the books close in July and probably come before the board in August as the amendment. The item or the work element 10 is the update and expand local road safety action plans in Mendocino County. Also, again, an estimated amount of carryover. The MCOG training element, $10,000. We suspect that some carryover will be dropped into this element in the amendment. So this is just new money identified here. The work element 15, Point Arena Downtown Parking Master Plan. This project has not been able to get started this year, so we have identified all of the carryover for $48,375 and will continue working closely with Point Arena. 16 is the multimodal transportation planning element. This one has $55,000. The GIS, the Geographic Information System activities, $6,500. And MCOG has grant development and assistance for a total of $55,000. Also here is the project reserve, and you can see that some of these totals increase slightly with some estimated carryover, bringing this total to $100,751. The project reserve is a little above average this year. As I mentioned previous, with the above pending grant application for the sea level rise project, MCOG did set a reserve aside for the local match for that grant application. If it is awarded, that will be $45,880 of that total there that will go as the local match to that grant. Additionally, in the project reserve, MCOG started setting aside some money to fund the pavement management program update. It is a priority for the local agencies. And MCOG staff did submit an RPA, a Rural Planning Assistance Discretionary Grant, to try and help fund this project, which we were unsuccessful in. So these funds have been set aside to begin planning for the 25-26 overall work program to start funding the pavement management program update in that year. So this is the final overall work program. I do suspect by August that we will need to amend this work program, as Janet previously mentioned. The contracts between the administration and the planning amounts may be adjusted once the contracts are all approved, and so that will also be reflected in the amendment. These are also all estimates. This final totals $970,166. In this spreadsheet, you can see it broken down by local, state, and federal. We do have federal funds in this work program, which help fund the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan. So if anyone's kind of wondering, we have been in the past able to submit our final overall work programs in June. It does set us a little bit behind schedule, but we'd like to kind of get in line with Caltrans's actual requirements of having the overall work program submitted by June 3rd. And so in order to do that, we did want to bump this up to May and try and get enough time to submit our forms and documents and have enough time to get everything completed in adequate a time to get it to submit it to Caltrans. So I apologize if this feels like it was a little rushed on you. I'm happy to answer any questions and scroll through any of the other spreadsheets and answer any questions. There is one further spreadsheet that does, this breaks down carryover. This breaks it down by actual funding source. So I am, like I said, happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
So, Alexis, I don't have any concerns with voting on it today. I do have one question, though. Over the years, I've seen, where the cities will ask for a planning grant for a specific planning project, and, the end result is maybe there's a downtown streetscape or a parking project, there's a planning process, public meetings, and then there's a document that's produced at the end of the day. But the county DOT always, they don't apply for a specific project as far as I can see. I mean, sometimes they do, I guess, but every single year it's just a generic line item and they get it every single year, combined special studies, and I've never seen, I have no idea what exactly that's funding. I never see a document produced. Maybe there is, but I don't know, I'm just kind of curious. It seems like it's different from the other grants. Is it just going to pay DOT staff? What's it for?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Nafili might be able to help me out a little bit. Also, we do have a final report that we get from them that I'm happy to share with the board. And I do have their application if you'd like a little bit more detail, but I know that it does help support them doing special studies in different areas of the county. I also see Alicia is online if she'd like to kind of give a little bit more information on that as well.
Yeah, Alicia can probably add more, but I will say that one thing that this funds is the county's local road safety review. This is something that was started decades ago, and I believe the county actually won an award for this program. They take about 1/3 of the county road network every year, and they just sort of review any safety concerns that have come up in the previous years and make adjustments. Sort of like, my understanding at least is it's simple adjustments like improving visibility, new signage, things like that, and it has had some safety improvements. So that's one of the things that it does specifically fund. That's done by their engineering division. And I will, if Alicia is available and wants to add anything more, that would be very helpful.
Well, just my thought that, when you're on the city council, you often attend those meetings that the city staff conducts with these special projects, and then you get a copy of the report. And just seems like DOT staff probably should at least send a PDF version of the report to the 5 supervisors at a minimum, so they know what was done in the past year with the funds, because it's a line item every year, and you have no idea what's being done with the funds.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that certainly is something that we can request.
And for clarification, we do receive a final work product from them, so I'm happy to bring that before the board as well.
Yeah, I don't know if the entire board needs to do it. I just think the 5 supervisors ought to get a copy of it. I don't think we need a paper copy, just a PDF, just to see what it says.
Sure.
Do we have any comments from the board or members of the public who want to comment on the overall work program? I think it makes sense to approve it in May, so there's time to process the paperwork with the state.
I don't have any questions, but I would like to say I wouldn't mind seeing a copy of that. Now
Okay.
that you've brought that up, that's something I'd like to know.
I'll move acceptance of the recommended action.
I will second.
Can we have roll call?
John Hashek,
Yes.
Director Mike Carter,
Yes.
Director Greta Connie,
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Director Josephine, Sasha Ostrand, Chair Danger.
Yes. All right, well, that takes us to approval of the staff recommendation to oppose Assembly Bill 2290, 1216, 960, SB 960, and AB, but support AB 817. So,
All right.
over this.
Several bills of interest this year, 3 that are potentially problematic and 1 that could be an improvement for MCOG and other boards and agencies with advisory committees. So start out AB 2290 and SB 1216. These both limit the ability of local agencies and the state to use Class 3 bikeways. And Class 3 bikeways are often what we refer to as sharrows. It's when there's, rather than a separate bike lane, a separate striped bike lane, or a buffered, like Class 1 bikeway. There isn't room for that, but there are images placed on the pavement to let drivers know that they are sharing a lane with bicyclists. So it's really just a tool for awareness of the potential presence of cyclists in the roadway. They are not suitable for all situations, and of course, I think that most jurisdictions, when possible, would prefer to have a Class 2, which is that's separated by, striped bike lane, sometimes a buffered striped bike lane, or even a Class 1 facility. But that's not always possible if there are topographical constraints in an area, or more commonly, it's used in an urbanized area, and so there's development or just a narrow roadway. So it can still serve a purpose for providing a link in a system. So these bills would eliminate the possibility of active transportation program, which is the competitive state program. It's probably the biggest source of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in the state right now. Certainly the largest source that we have access to, competitive access, but that we have access to locally. So it would prevent those funds. It would prevent any project that includes a Class 3 bikeway from being funded with active transportation program funds. Now, a project that is just doing a Class 3 bikeway would never be funded with ATP funds because it's a very competitive program, very oversubscribed. So that wouldn't compete anyway. It's never going to fund just that. But it could be an important tool for a local agency to provide a link. And connectivity and completeness of a system is something that could make a project more competitive. So we don't want to eliminate that possibility for our local agencies in situations where it makes sense. So that's AB 2290 and AB 1260. Now, sorry, I did not have all my notes ready for this item. So the other thing that AB 2290 does is that it would require funds or projects that are funded with the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Program including maintenance and safety projects, to incorporate bicycle facilities in the project, in like a maintenance or a safety project, if the facility has been identified in an adopted plan or document, and that they would have to publish justification if the facility is not included. And they're very limited qualified justifications for not including something. Previously, the quality of nearby alternative facilities, so say that there was a nearby class 1 facility that would be better suited for bicycle travel, it eliminates that as a factor in determining whether or not to incorporate that into a project. So I think that the intent here is good, the idea that it's a way to get more of these projects built. However, the concern is that it would really impact local agencies' ability to deliver basic projects. You know, our local agencies have very little funding to deliver their maintenance projects, to deliver operational improvements, and by forcing them to incorporate things when they either don't have the funding or it doesn't make sense, really limits their ability to deliver those projects. So that's the reasoning behind the opposition to 2290. SB 1216 focuses more just on the Class 3 bikeway limitations. SB 960. This creates new targets for Caltrans to address in the State Highway System Management Plan. The State Highway System Management Plan essentially spells out what Caltrans will be including in the State Highway Operations and Protection Program, or SHOP. When planning projects for the SHOP, Caltrans, I think each district has a certain target they have to meet for certain types of improvements. And this would add a requirement for targets in the State Highway System Management Plan for transit priority facilities. It also would require complete streets targets. That is not currently identified. It's not currently a requirement of the SHSMP by statute. However, that is something that Caltrans is already doing. They're including improvements or including targets for bicycle and pedestrian improvements already in the SHOP. So the most significant change here would be the transit priority facilities. And the concern is that it doesn't create any new money. So it's creating a new responsibility for the SHOP without adding any money to it. So adding a new responsibility, no new money, means less money for the other things that the SHOP is already paying for. It also is a concern that in a rural area, we are unlikely to have transit priority facilities. And this doesn't, the language of this bill allows Caltrans leadership to define the transit priority facilities. It doesn't call for any local input or regional input in that process. And so if a priority transit facility is a bus-only lane, that is something we are very unlikely to see in a rural region like Mendocino County. And so there is concern that it would just mean less funding overall in the SHOP for rural regions. So again, maybe it has good intentions, similar to the previous bills, but it has potentially negative impacts in our rural areas. So those are the three that I do recommend a position of opposition to. And then the fourth bill of interest is AB 817. And this would actually allow flexibility for members of local advisory bodies. So for instance, the executive committee, the technical advisory committee, the transit productivity committee are all advisory bodies to MCOG. Those advisory bodies would have the flexibility to, members of those advisory bodies would be able to participate in meetings that do not, from locations that do not have to be noticed. So somebody could participate via Zoom and wouldn't have, from their own home, for instance, without having to provide notice and public availability of that location. It doesn't change public access to any meetings, and it does require two-way teleconference situations. So it just would allow those bodies. It wouldn't change it for, like MCOG itself, but for advisory bodies, it does provide more flexibility. It is just temporary at this point in time. It would end January 1st, 2026. So a permanent change would be preferable, but this is certainly a step in the right direction. So those are my recommendations. Oh, yes. CalCog has, I don't know if they've actually they've had a seek amendment on some of these, but they have been strongly pushing for support of AB 817 for the teleconferencing.
So Nabil, I have a question about the first one. Let's see, that is AB 2290. So I was just looking online at the legislative website. So it says funds appropriated for the active transportation program shall be allocated to a project that creates a Class 3 bikeway unless the project is on a residential street with a posted speed limit of 20 miles or less. So I actually agree with the concept that you don't really want the sharrows on higher speed roads. You want them on the lowest speed roads possible. But if I'm reading it correctly, it looks like they're saying no active transportation funds would be used for a bikeway project if any portion of the project includes the sharrow, because you could have a bike route that includes multiple streets across town. So is the reason for the opposition because they're saying even if your route you're trying to establish throughout town involves multiple streets, you can't get an ATP grant if even one section of it involves that sharrow?
Yes, the way it's written, and if there were amendments to this bill on Thursday or Friday, I will say I didn't look at it since Wednesday, and sometimes they do change the language. But yes, my understanding is that the way it is currently written, even if a project just include a portion of it were to have a sharrow, it wouldn't be eligible for ATP funding. And AB 2290 actually references design speed, not just a posted speed limit. So or at least it was, for design speed of 20 miles an hour or less.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a more reasonable position would be that you just don't allocate ATP funds for that portion of the project. Mm-hmm. So would you want to communicate that we're opposed, but that if they change the language to only exclude that portion of the project that was on a sharrow, then we're fine? I mean, I think otherwise we wouldn't be opposed to the bill. Because I think it does make sense for the sharrows to be on slower roads, not on higher speed roads. That's where the drivers can get upset.
Yes, the other portion of 2290 that is of concern is the part that would require a bike or a bicycle facility to be included in any project funded by an RMRA funded project, if it's been identified in any plan. So a maintenance project would have to include addition of a bicycle facility.
Okay. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Yeah, I read through these earlier, and on the face you think, oh, these are good projects. Intentions are good. I think the authors were well-intentioned, but it's one of those issues where one size doesn't fit all. And certainly we need the flexibility, especially in a rural county. And I think all of these legislators are from more urban centers. And so if we can create some, watch position or opposition if it doesn't change, that would be fine with me. With the AB 817, that is certainly something we've been watching for a long time, and its time has certainly come. We need to get this passed, and it's disappointing that January 1st, 2026 is the deadline or the end date, because that's coming up sooner than we realize, and I hope that it's something that can be put in permanently. Because there's all the advisory bodies you were talking about, but there's also, we have the MACs, and they could certainly benefit from this too. So the county has a lot of advisory bodies that would. We need to keep people off the road as much as possible.
Yes, I think, especially in a large county like Mendocino, it is really challenging to get some of those groups together. And also I think it discourages participation when people, are going to have to travel to participate in some of those. So I agree. And I certainly think it sounds like maybe there's interest in, rather than positions of opposition on the first two bills, just to do comment letters and then to watch those. So comment letters about the specific concerns rather than opposition.
I mean, I think sometimes the problem is, well, I'm okay with the opposition letter, but I wouldn't mind some specifics as to why. So we're not just saying we're opposed.
Well, I think the issue too was we're opposed to it as it exists, but what if it gets changed, and then do we want to provide some flexibility to you?
So maybe an oppose unless amended.
Right.
I mean, it's sort of ironic that what we're wanting from this bill is ultimately more flexibility for local governments, and yet we would just issue an opposition, them no flexibility.
So yeah, I can certainly do that. I can draft letters that express those concerns and with oppose unless amended, or just comments, and then watch it and follow up with a letter with oppose unless amended later if those things do not change.
It probably gets their attention a little more if it says oppose unless amended than just a generic comment. But I would go with that.
And then is that the case also for 960, which creates the targets for priority transit facilities in the shop? Oppose unless amended.
Just the question is, you're clear about what the amendment needs to be?
On that one, so I'd love to hear from the board what
yeah,
if there are parts of that you support, I guess.
It sounds like part of the concern is that there's no ability for local governments to designate the transit-oriented, I don't know if they're using the term transit-oriented development, but it sounds kind of like what they're talking about.
Yeah, transit priority facilities.
If I'm understanding correctly, that was the one that sort of had the mandate without funding, unfunded mandate, right?
Yes.
So right. I think maybe the change could be if the state were going to offer some sort of funding mechanism for local governments to adhere to this new bill, then we'd be in support. But if they're just going to give us new rules to follow with no additional funding that would essentially reduce the amount we had for maintenance projects, then
This one, and I may not have clarified this one is specific to Caltrans, so it would be state highway projects. So it would be priority transit projects on state highways.
Yeah, so it sounds like this one issue is, this is for urban settings where they have these priority transit facilities, and we don't have those. And so it would kind of take away funding from rural areas.
That is my concern, yes.
Yeah. So I think opposition would be warranted in this case.
I agree.
I think it might be appropriate to include in the letter that Caltrans projects are already including complete streets in their design. And so this is sort of concentrating funds into urbanized areas for an approach that's already being taken statewide.
Well, I'll move approval of the recommended actions with the direction given to Nepealing.
And I will second that.
Okay, any public comment? Not seeing any. We have roll call.
Director John.
Aye.
Director Mike Carter.
Yes.
Director Greta Connie.
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell.
Yes.
Director Josephina Duenas. And Sasha Ostrom.
Yes.
And Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee reconvenes the RTPA. Do we have a motion to ratify the actions of the Policy Advisory Committee?
I will move so.
Second.
We have roll call?
Director John Haskell.
Yep.
Director Mike Carter.
Yes.
Greta Connie.
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell. Director Josephina Duenas. Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes. Well, that takes us to reports. We have a report from Caltrans.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. I wanted to talk about the Protect application that we submitted for State Route 128. It was a segment of 128 to address flooding, storm surge, and sea level rise. The Protect stands for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation Program. It's a program that provides funding for vulnerabilities due to weather, natural disaster, and climate change. The objectives of the application include data analysis and monitoring, evaluating feasible adaptation strategies, identifying vulnerable populations, identifying climate resilient alternatives, and ultimately to develop an implementation plan. So we're supposed to hear back on that award of that sometime in June. We'll keep you posted. At the March board meeting, a member of the public had spoken during the public expression asking about the North State Street interchange. So I wanted to follow up on that. A feasibility was developed by Caltrans in 2011 that looked at widening the North State Street undercrossing structure, widening the main line north and south of the structure and restriping. And then in 2018, a PID project initiation report was developed to request funding through the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program. That PID looked at northbound on-ramp merge at North State Street and addressing the queuing issues of the southbound off-ramp. Unfortunately, that was not selected for funding, but since then we continuously monitor all collisions at this location. These are generated into what we call a Table C report. This location has not appeared on a Table C report since 2016, and since January 2021, the northbound on-ramp has had one collision. But we have initiated other work at this location. In 2023, there was a work order for removal of the non-mature oak trees to improve sight distance, and that work is complete, I think was mentioned at the last meeting. There's also another work order to improve signage at the interchange, and that's actually happening today. So when you leave this meeting, it might be in the works. That some of the existing signage will be removed and new signage is proposed to help clarify this merge. In the future, there's limitations through the shop, but some options could be a bridge widening alternative when the bridge is due for replacement. That's not currently on the 10-year horizon though. There is potential for a proactive safety project that may not require a collision history to prompt a project. but we're also considering applying for the project again through the TSEP program in the next fiscal year, 25-26. I did want to go through briefly the Caltrans milestone report that's in your agenda package. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see. Are you seeing that? Hopefully. So just a summary of some of the changes to this is the PID list, which just highlighted in their own list, pulled out of the main report. Just wanting to note that the milestones are subject to change, especially on the projects that have significant public outreach. Already some of these milestones have increased at 80% here, 75 and 30. The projects are now sorted by route. And also several of the milestones have been removed to show only construction beginning and construction ending, just to make that more user friendly, but that information is still available if there's interest in that. We also added a map here with the corresponding project number. The map did not include the PIDs, just for visual clarity. And we're just always looking to improve on these reports, so please let us know if you have any suggestions. And then I'm going to hand it over to Brian, who's going to discuss the Ridgewood Grade Safety Project if there's no questions on any of this.
No questions, but it's much more detailed than I think we've ever seen before. So, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Hi there, good afternoon. My name is Brian Fink. I'm a project manager for Caltrans District 1, and I was asked to present on a safety project that we have upcoming. And let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen. I'll share a couple plan sheets to give you an idea. Let's see. Does that look like it's working?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, let me do one other thing. Let's see. Okay. Screen sharing. Okay. The Zoom I have not used before, so this is kind of new. We use WebEx and Teams quite a bit. So the project description, it's between post mile 39.8 and post mile 40.4 on Highway 101 in Mendocino. It's near the top of Ridgewood Grade, south of the summit, and I'm sure everyone is pretty familiar with this area. It's the first curve that you come down as you're coming down the 4-lane divided expressway. The project will provide 4 maintenance areas. It'll replace the median barrier. It'll also have new shoulder and rumble strip. And we're basically increasing the size of the shoulders inside and out. So let me kind of go through the plan sheets here. These are the typical cross sections, so give some details as you go through the roadway. And then these are layouts. I'll start at the top, L3, as you're coming down the hill from Ridgewood Grade. The maintenance turnouts are shown in red here. There's one on the southbound, and then there's the next one's going to be on the northbound side as you're coming down the hill. And then the third one should be here on the corner. I don't know if you can see my cursor okay or not. And then there's also another one in this area. Okay. I guess that's kind of the gist of the program. Construction will not start until 2026, the fall of 2026. I would anticipate most of the construction taking place in the summer of 2027. and being completed in 2027, minus some smaller things that won't really be noticeable to the traveling public, but concluding in 2028. Are there any questions regarding this?
Director Hatchak.
Yeah, Brian, there was just a project with putting in new guardrails along that area.
Yes, that is correct.
Are they going to have to be taken out then to do this project?
I don't know. Was the guardrail put in that section of the roadway?
It seems like,
Okay.
yeah, it seems like all the way from the summit down to Ridge or Redwood Valley practically.
Yeah, there is an extensive project going on there. I don't believe it covers this short section between Ridgewood Ranch Road and Black Bart Drive. It's a very limited area through there, and I actually drove through there this past weekend, but I did not note if there's guardrail being replaced in that section.
Okay, they might have completed that section already.
That could be. I can find out that information, but I do not know that currently.
Okay, thank you.
I know there's a couple of spots on the 101, and that this seems to be one of those areas where this rock composition, soil composition seems to be kind of problematic, and maybe the hillside kind of moves. So with all the work that's been going on the 101 in locations like this, is Caltrans trying to figure out a way to kind of stabilize that hillside movement, or is that just sort of something that can't be stabilized? It's just the way it is.
I know over the years I've worked for Caltrans for about 20 years. I personally have not worked in this section of the roadway, but just monitoring from a distance and discussions with others. You know, the whole hillside is moving. They've tried to do a number of different things. Lightweight fill they put in there. I don't believe this section that we're discussing, it has that issues. This section it's the geometry, the curve is tight. They're going to increase the width of the shoulders through this section and try to lessen the curve because as you're coming down into it, it's a 55-mile-an-hour section.
Got it. So that's the stable part.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a question in the audience. Go ahead.
Robert King. Mr. King, is that correct? Robert King?
My name is Brian Fink. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well. Good afternoon. My name is Gizmo. So my question is, although Caltrans continues to use what they call slide mitigation material, and continues to tell us that they've tried all these different types of ways to keep that hillside stable, I've never seen, other than the Cloverdale project years ago, using roots instead of rocks. I've read your own soils reports, and your soils report indicates that if Native American, if Native grasses and vegetation is grown on the hillsides, that it helps shade the hillsides, continues to hold water, and mitigates a lot of slide issues, you know, that we have here in this county. It's in your own soils report. So have you ever tried roots instead of rocks?
I personally have not, and my background is not in geology, I'll say, or soils, but I can pass the information along and try to find some additional information on it from geotechnical people and some additional civil engineers.
Yeah, because I actually have read the soils reports from Caltrans themselves for that hillside, And one of the things that was easily noticeable to me was that the steeper hillsides around are being held with vegetation, and that was noted in your own soils report. So we've only been dealing with this for I don't know how many years. I think it might be time to maybe try something a little bit different, so we might be able to get a little bit of a different result. Thank you.
Okay.
And again, I can pass that information along. I'm sure we'd be ecstatic if we could find a way to keep it from moving. So let me do a little research on that and perhaps come back another day with the findings.
Well, thanks, Brian, for the presentation. It's always interesting to see some of these projects before they happen. And Tasha, thanks for including that as part of your update.
Yeah, please let us know if there are other projects that you'd like to highlight and we can set that up.
We have a comment from Zoom. Peter McNamee.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question for Caltrans. There is a proposal for a gas station at the bottom of the Highway 101 southbound towards Ukiah, close to the entrance of Redwood Valley. And previously Caltrans has taken the position that if the gas station were to be built and permitted by the county, that it would require that the intersection there that allows southbound vehicles to cross the northbound lanes and enter onto North State Street would have to be closed and a median installed at that location. My question for Caltrans is that continue to be Caltrans's position in regard to any development there that would involve added traffic from a gas station?
You know, I know that our local development review team did go to a recent county, I think, Board of Supervisors meeting to address this, but I would not be the person to respond to that. So certainly I could follow up with you later.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, thanks for the updates. All right, well, then that takes us to, oh, go ahead.
If I may, I just wanted to go back to the North State Street because I didn't get a chance to actually address that. It kind of went on from the North State Street entrance onto 101 heading north. And just a suggestion, I really, although there hasn't been any accidents there, and I thank you for addressing that issue. I'm not sure if it was me who we spoke to about addressing that, but I really appreciate you addressing that. I've worked with Phil Frisbee since 2016 to try to keep that, it's about the time that you mentioned, to try to keep that pruned up. I use that entrance a lot because I use Mendocino Mill a lot. And I just would like to make the suggestion that Caltrans, although the bridge enlargement project could be a solution, there may be a way to save money if there is crash incidences or merging incidences in the future, to utilize Ford Road as our access off of the freeway. There's already an overpass there, and that would allow us to come to a street light, which would allow us to turn left a lot safer than getting across the 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 different lanes there to get onto State Street heading south. It's just a long ways to turn when you take the off-ramp off of 101 heading north. A lot of lanes to cross. Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, I think we're ready to go on to Mendocino Transit Authority update. I don't know if Jacob or someone else from MTAs. Okay, well, I think we've kind of heard MTA update in the budget presentation already, so. All right, then on to, I don't know, Great Redwood Trail Agencies or any update there?
Well, on April 10th, we had a town hall meeting in Ukiah where we rolled out the draft master plan for the Redwood Trail, Great Redwood Trail. And so it was, there was quite a few people there and well received. And certainly there's comments with questions and concerns. And then next week on the 16th, we have the Great Redwood Trail Agency meeting in Healdsburg and also in Eureka. So they're having them in dual locations because we're representing the 4 counties, Marin, Sonoma, Humboldt, and Mendocino.
All right, that takes us to MCOG staff summary meetings. We have it in our packet. I'd like to highlight there, then we could go on to administrative staff verbal reports. Oh.
There's 2 meetings on May 2nd that my name's on attending, but unfortunately I was unable to correct the record.
Thanks, Laura.
All right. Well, we've just, the first verbal report is just a debrief of the CTC Town Hall meeting that was hosted by MCOG in Fort Bragg on April 17th and 18th. Thank you for those of you that were able to be there and those that sent their alternates. It, I think, was a really successful event, and we have gotten a lot of good feedback from CTC staff and commissioners. I think that it was a very eye-opening experience for them. You know, they were, just the process of getting to the meeting was a learning experience for them. Hearing about people's, you know, how far, the distances people have to drive for healthcare, seeing how a community would really be completely cut off if the highway slid into the ocean. I think that it was really well received, and we did a good job. And the presenters, the presenters all did a really great job. The cities, counties, and the Resource Conservation District and Caltrans all gave really, really informative presentations that I think really helped the commissioners understand the challenges that we face, but then also showcased some of the things that we have been able to deliver and the positive things that we've been able to accomplish with the funding that we receive either through formula or competitive programs in the state. So it was a good program and
very well attended, I would say,
yes,
too.
Well attended.
Just exactly the right size venue for that group. So we had a good crowd there.
I just want to thank all of you from the administrative team. You really did a fantastic job putting the program on, and even though it was a long trek over to the coast, I was glad to be there, and I found it to be a very informative day, so thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say the same. It's, you know, that was 2 days of really, it was packed with information, and hopefully those commissioners go back and remember Mendocino County has these real costly projects that we have to fund. And so when they're making their decisions, you know, they've done a good job so far in funding some of our big projects, but we've got a lot ahead of us too. So I think your team really presented us in the best light, or impactful light.
Thank you.
And city staff was a huge help as well.
Yes, City of Fort Bragg staff really took care of a lot of behind the scenes details for us. So, and somehow we got perfect weather for the whole weekend too.
That's right. So sunny. Not that normal for the coast.
Yeah, and I think it was a good complement of every kind of project in Mendocino County. I mean, the inclusion of the resource conservation projects was probably a little surprising, I would guess, for the CTC, just because it was
different.
Yeah.
But they usually.
Yeah. So.
I was impressed that the Fort Bragg Police Department has a fleet of electric trucks, and they were going to let their higher level staff try them out first, but they didn't take them up on it, so all the guys, the rookies, got to drive them and had a great time. Apparently no problem so far. They're working well.
Right. Well, thanks for everything you did to organize that. Do you have an update on the Caltrans Hopland ADA project?
Yes. So this is a project that has been, it's a Caltrans implemented project. It's been in project development for 5 or 6 years now, I would say. It's a multi-purpose project, but one of the main objectives of the project was to correct the slope, the east-west slope across US 101 through downtown Hopland. There were other things that the project was accomplishing too, like pavement and crossing improvements, and they were looking at improvements at 175 for pedestrian crossing as well. So after several years, which were admittedly, I think, slowed down during the pandemic, it now is at the point where Caltrans had started working with they'd gotten to the point in the project where they were working with the local utility district. And what it came to light that there were going to be significant relocation impacts on this very small public utility district. Now, the way state law works in terms of utility relocations, that if the highway right-of-way is pre-existing to the utility right-of-way, the cost of relocation is on the utility. Now, a lot of times when it's PG&E or another large utility, they're more easily able to absorb those types of costs. But this very small district, I think they have around 300 ratepayers or something like that. It was going to be a much bigger burden. So after several months of meeting with them and other stakeholders, Caltrans is now looking at options for moving forward with a scaled back project that would still allow them to deliver some improvements through downtown Hopland without significantly impacting the utilities. So it's going to be, it will not accomplish all of the things, because when you're changing the elevation of a roadway, if you're not doing that, obviously, that is, in order to not impact utilities, you can't really change the elevation of the roadway. So they will be holding a public meeting in early June to get feedback on these new project concepts. And hopefully we'll get good turnout. Recent input so far, like I said, they've been having meetings with the utilities district and the MAC, but there haven't been any just general public meetings. So that's their next step in the process. But they are looking for ways to still deliver a project, what parts of the project that can be salvaged without significantly impacting the utilities district. So more to come on that, but they'll be seeking public input in June.
Thanks for the update. I know part of the problem was that to relocate the utilities, you could not use highway funds. And so I know that the county's grants staff tried to explore opportunities to get other grants outside of transportation, and they just weren't really available. I think it's kind of like an a number of problems just sort of kept creeping up on funding it, because some of the utilities aren't that old, and so they couldn't necessarily get a competitive grant to replace relatively new infrastructure. So there was just a number of things seemed to conspire against getting grants.
Yes, and there were, like Senator McGuire's office put in a budget request for it. So there were efforts to figure out ways to pay for this, and it's not just the relocation itself, it's the engineering studies that the utility would have to do even before they could get to that. And then there were additional concerns from the community associated with that, because it would extend the length of the temporary construction, duration of the temporary construction easements through town, because the utility work would be done essentially first, and then the highway work later, so longer construction. But right, current law does not allow Caltrans to pay, even if there's enough money in the project, they're not allowed to pay for that if their right-of-way is pre-existing to the utility. So they were really limited on what they can do. And I know there is even some discussion, of course, something like that would take years to change most likely, but there's discussion about the possibility of making changes to, would be a need for future legislation to allow greater flexibility for impacts to very small users. So unfortunately, a change like that maybe would allow Caltrans to come back in many years and make that change. But there are improvements that they need to do in Hopland in the meantime, so it's not really feasible to wait for that change of law for this particular project.
Thanks for the update. Is there a miscellaneous report?
I don't have any miscellaneous.
All right. Next meeting's June 3rd. Budget adoption. Loretta, are you here for a planning update?
Good afternoon, and thank you. So the first report I have is on work element 9 of the current year's work program. That's the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan. This is a Caltrans Sustainable Communities Planning Grant funded with federal funds. There's approximately $200,000 in this grant for the consultant portion of the project. It's been going on for a while as far as the procurement. The consultant selection committee met recently to review the 2 proposals that were received. We had hoped to receive more. We did advertise it widely, and we posted it on our website and on Caltrans' website. But the 2 proposals that were received were strong proposals with firms that we are familiar with. And the consultant selection committee was comprised of representatives from MCOG staff, City of Fort Bragg, the County Department of Transportation, and the Noyo Harbor District, with Caltrans as a non-voting member. After reviewing the proposals, the group decided to hold interviews with the two consultant firms, and those interviews are scheduled for this week. So we are hopeful in the next couple of weeks to have made a decision and get a consultant under contract and start that project in May. It's about a 1.5-year project with anticipated completion by December of 2025. The project itself includes a good amount of public outreach with a technical advisory committee comprised of technical staff, and then a stakeholder group that will be determined, as well as public meetings. So I know the gentleman on the phone had wanted to talk about his public input on, I believe it was being on the technical advisory group. So I don't know if this would be a good time for you to
Yeah, sure. Peter McMee.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for giving me a short time to speak to you about this. Believe me when I say I need to be on another committee like I need an extra hole in my head. I've got a lot of different projects going on, but every once in a while, a project comes along that fits into the existing work that I've been focusing on for the Grassroots Institute. Some of you may not be familiar with the Grassroots Institute, but we're an all-volunteer nonprofit organization, nonpartisan. We meet the 501c3 requirements. What we do is we facilitate the involvement of citizens in educational activities to make them aware of important challenges that exist in Mendocino County. And then we attempt to empower them to take action to secure a better and brighter future for the common good. And in regard to the local coastal program updates that are underway along the coast, we have a very involved work group that incorporates approximately 80 different people in Mendocino County who are interested and engaged in how we address climate change and sea level rise and how that impacts local planning and land use on a wide and a very wide sense. So when it became evident that MCOG was going to do a study focusing specifically on the harbor and the transportation needs in the harbor, we focused in on that. And I was asked to put my own name forward as a person to participate with MCOG on that. I don't have training or background in transportation, so your technical advisory group might not be the best place, but certainly the stakeholder group would be one where my organization has a definite interest. We are an active participant in the Blue Economy plan development, and I participate in that city and harbor-led effort. So since your MCOG study on the transportation needs in the harbor will be part of the overall process of addressing planning and land use for the harbor going forward, it seems like a really good fit since we already have a citizens group that we keep informed. And just to give you a sense of the interest in this, we've convened over 7 public sessions with on average about 50 people participating in each of those sessions. There's a lot of interest in terms of how Mendocino's coastal areas are changing, and in particular what that means for the local economies, for land use development, for transportation, for water. All of the, right now we're on track to have somewhere around 8 different studies ongoing in the next 24 months, leading up to a major plan revision for how we regulate land use. And so I just wanted to say that we applaud MCOG for taking this initiative, and we want to see it be a success. So I've put my own name forward as someone that would be happy to be involved in the advisory work on this study. I think it's critical that the citizens be engaged from the very beginning on these studies. Otherwise, unfortunately, what happens if the public doesn't get engaged until after the studies are completed and the reports are done, you end up with the public not supporting the outcomes. And we want to avoid that. And that's why we're doing what we're doing across the board. So that's why I contacted you today, and hope you'll consider this as an opportunity to build on outreach efforts to the community. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We would definitely welcome your participation, and Niffy Lee might want to comment, but I feel the stakeholder group would be more appropriate than the technical committee.
Yeah, I agree. I think the stakeholder group would be appropriate. And then also wanted to mention, since you mentioned the blue economy and the other work that's being done in the harbor area, we will be coordinating, or the consultants will be coordinating with that effort in terms of public and stakeholder outreach to the extent possible. So that, and of course, the Harbor District and all of the City of Fort Bragg County will all be involved as well. So hopefully all of the work that's being done in that area will be acknowledged and be part of MCOG's study.
All right, should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So my next report is on work element 10 of the current year's work program, the local road safety / action plan update project. So the purpose of this project was to update the county and the 4 cities' local road safety plans to add some missing components that they need to make the agencies eligible for a federal grant program, the federal Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So that project has been under contract with consultants. It's been going on for a few months. The first stakeholder meeting was held in April with good attendance. The consultant is TJKM. They gave a presentation which was sent out to stakeholders and posted on the project website. The project website is MendocinoRoadSafetyPlan.com, and it's also linked on MCOG's website. So we've been having the monthly status meetings with the consultant and local agencies. The first virtual public meeting, which I believe some of you attended, was held on April 25th. It was low attendance, which wasn't great. We did advertise it, and I saw that I think 4 of the local media papers picked it up, but it did not have great attendance. And then 2 in-person workshops are scheduled, one on the coast on May 20th at Fort Bragg Town Hall, and an inland workshop in Ukiah at the Alex Warbaugh Recreation Center on May 21st, and those are in the late afternoon at 5:30. So those are in-person public workshops, and then an additional virtual public workshop will be held via Zoom on May 23rd. So we're expecting the completed plans to be wrapped up by the end of June. It will put local agencies in good position to not only apply for the federal SS4A grants next year, but this year, the state's, I believe the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the HSIP program, has recently opened, and those projects are due late summer or early fall. So it'll put local agencies in a good position to apply for safety projects through that grant program. So I'm be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I wasn't able to attend, but I got a call from Director Connie afterwards. And my understanding is that the Sherwood Road is one of the has the most incidents, traffic problems in the county. And so I contacted Lieutenant Commander McCandless from CHP to just talk about what they're seeing there. And they certainly, it's on their radar. They're going to do an evaluation of the incidents and see what they might recommend. And then I talked to Sheriff Kendall, and he says, yeah, this has been going on for many years. And when you have a road that has like 9,000 trips per day when it was built for 3,000, that's a problem. And so I'm going to have a little report later about the second access route. But in the meantime, we might consider some traffic calming measures along that corridor from, I guess, Poppy down to the Willett city line is a problematic area. So I hope they're looking at things.
Hopefully they're giving us those comments also, those agencies. Are they submitting those comments to anyone?
Oh, I don't know, but I could certainly have them make
And
the
they
call.
may be on our stakeholder group, CHP. And
Yeah, we had some, there was law enforcement, I want to say it was just Fort Bragg was the only enforcement that was in that last stakeholder meeting.
definitely make a note of that.
Yeah, it certainly seems like CHP and the sheriff should be attending those. They see what's out there.
Thank you. And
People who consider themselves from Willits live off of Sherwood Road. So we would certainly, the city of Willits would appreciate any help in not waiting necessarily for a long-term solution of second access, but more immediate ways to slow and keep an eye on that traffic there and reduce it.
And then I have only one item under miscellaneous, and that is, I believe maybe Lexi mentioned it during her OW work program report, but we are expecting to hear within the next month or so the outcome of our climate adaptation sea level rise roadway impact study grant that we submitted in January. This is, including the local match, is about a $400,000 total project. So hopefully at our June meeting, we'll be able to report some good news on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
I believe we do have one other miscellaneous planning report from James as well.
Great.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to give a quick update on one of the projects that the board that was adopted in the RTIP back in December. So the county had proposed doing about 4 miles of an AC overlay on Mountain View Road with approximately $2 million in STIP funds. At the November meeting, Alicia from the county was talking about an alternative that the county was thinking about, which was full depth reclamation and doing up to approximately 15 miles worth of that on the road instead of the 4 miles of AC overlay. The only thing we weren't sure at the time was whether that was an eligible use of funds. I have worked with the CTC and it is an eligible use, and so that is the direction that the county would like to proceed because they will get more done with the limited amount of funding that they have. That's all I've got at the moment. Are there any questions?
I think so. We already gave authorization for it, so great.
Yeah, the project is
require.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this doesn't require a STIP amendment or an amendment to the RTIP. It's already been included. It's just a slight deviation from what was described originally in their application. It'll just provide a better product overall.
Right, so the project is approved. The county had discussed their possible alternative approach to improving the roadway, and this is just following up on which approach they have chosen to move forward with. So it doesn't require board action, doesn't change the RTIP.
Alicia, do you want to comment?
Yeah, hi everyone. I did want to mention that we are still figuring on doing the asphalt overlays on the sharp turns and steep grades, but in a combination with the full depth reclamation, just so that we can extend the coverage of the amount of miles that would be able to be rehabilitated. So it'd be a combination of both.
Makes sense to me. I mean, I know in Fort Bragg on Boatyard Drive, for example, that where there's that turn, it was originally chip sealed and it wore out pretty quickly with the heavy trucks delivering to Boatyard Shopping Center. And I think we've sort of seen that with chip seals, that they don't always hold up really well on the turns. So it makes sense to do the overlay project at the turns where possible so they can handle that kind of action. I guess that puts us over to MCOG Director Reports.
Oh, I'll go ahead. So on April 20th, which was the Earth Day celebration in Covelo, I invited the community to go out and ride the multi-purpose trail, the part that's completed at this point. And so we had about 3 families join me. It was a beautiful day out there. The trail is really great for biking, walking, and it certainly will save lives, because the way it was unacceptable. And so that was really good to see. The people enjoyed it, and they were going to tell their friends to get out there and start hiking or riding it. We have that, the California Transportation Commission funded the $12 million for the environmental review and design for the second access route in Sherwood Road. So we had a meeting with county staff and the members from the Padula Trust, last week, I think it was last week, and we to talk about what the plans were and how to move some of the environmental review and design forward. So I think the staff felt like it was a productive meeting, and Padula Trust felt like there was communication going on, and I think that's really important in this process. It's going to be a long one. And I drove over on Highway 20 to Sacramento the other day, and it was really encouraging to see that the fiber optic cable that had been put in along Highway 20 for miles, every so often you see the cable pop up out of the ground, and so that was hopeful for that middle mile connection that's going on. So there's hope that it's going to come. County at some.
Yeah, there are 2 projects happening currently, but there are more to come.
All right, that's it for me.
Any other reports?
I am just going to say, for that everyone has been. I'm so sorry I missed the 2 days for break. I guess we were both at the Sacramento leadership, and so we heard about some of the ABs that you were talking about, and I also attended this Friday the California League of Cities, the Redwood one, and I had to commute from Rio Dale to Fort Bragg to pick up my son. And for the first time in 35 years, I drove from Leggett to Fort Bragg, and it was really kind of dangerous for me because I cannot see very well, and it was raining heavy, and the rocks were just on the ways. But I was thinking that how marvelous it is that we have our governments to be working on the highways, on all the places that connect one little town with another one. And it was just amazing to be out from the trees and just get to the light of the ocean. It fulfilled my spirit, and I don't know, I was just being really happy and really thankful for everything that you do every day in taking notes, in preparing yourselves, and just thinking about how to make it better for the people who live in this county. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think we have any. Do we have any CalCog updates?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hey, so the CalCog on May 21st is having their legislative day and board of directors meeting. So I won't be able to make it because we have a board of supervisors meeting that day. But if Commissioner Norvell wants to go in my place, that's May 21st from 10 to 2. In Sacramento. That's it.
All right. Well, then at 3:57, it looks like we are adjourned.